Hello and welcome to Great Things with Great Tech, Episode 8. My name's Anthony Spiteri and this podcast is all about highlighting companies doing great things with great tech. In this episode, we're talking to Neil Cresswell, co-founder at Portainer.io. Welcome to the show, Neil.
Thank you. Great pleasure to be here.
Yeah, really excited about this one. Before we get into Portainer, Neil, I just wanted to do a bit of a call out to Great Things with Great Tech. So if you love Great Things with Great Tech and would like to feature on future episodes, you can click the link on the show notes or go to launch.gtwgt.com and register your interest. And just as a reminder as well, now that we've got to do this on the YouTube, we are on YouTube and all good podcasting platforms, Spotify, Apple and whatnot. Please head there and subscribe because obviously this episode is here, but you can get all the previous episodes as well. I'm still chasing that first 100 subscribers on YouTube, so hit the little subscribe button at the bottom, and then you can keep up to date with all the goodness of what is to come on Great Things with Great Tech. Okay, Neil, let's get started on Portainer. This is exciting for me because it's taken 8 episodes to get through to a technology and start to talk about containers, which is all the buzz these days. So I'm really excited to have an episode based on the great technology, that containers is enabling in the world today. But before we get started on Portainer itself, let's talk about you because you've had a really interesting career in IT. Did you just want to give a bit of a background as to, where your journey started and how you've come to be, the co-founder of what is an open source containerization company?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a bit of an old dinosaur, you might say now. In this IT industry, I actually started at IBM a long time ago. I was at IBM for 13 years. I joined IBM when I was actually 18, believe it or not.
Oh, youngster.
A youngster. I was one of IBM's youngest employees in New Zealand at the time, anyway. But so that was fun, and that gave me a really good first job level appreciation of enterprise infrastructure, in enterprise platforms, how to do things right. A really solid education background around enterprise architecture and mission critical support systems. After that, I obviously jumped out and was a co-founder of VIFX, which was at the time a VMware consulting partner. We grew to be, I would say, New Zealand's most respected consulting partner, and expanded into Australia and into Asia.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I got the great privilege to actually go and spend some time up in Asia, living in Singapore.
Yeah, and CTO, right? You were CTO of
CTO.
And VIFX is now Parallel. Is that the name change that's happened now with them?
Yeah, we basically split VIFX in two, and one half became Parallel, and one half became Emerging Technology Partners, which at the start of this year we sold that to Cordia.
Okay.
So that whole phase of my career is now over.
Yep.
As a consultant in the NZ IT landscape, that's now over.
Yep.
To allow me to focus purely on Portainer.
Yeah. So just talk a little bit about your journey in Asia, because obviously in Singapore, I know you did some things in Southeast Asia as well. Just chat a little bit about that, because I think it all leads into what we're going to talk about with Portainer.
Yeah, so up in Singapore, I was basically as you said, the CTO of VIFX up there, and as part of that role, I was actually contracted into VMware to help run their PS team for the region. And through that engagement, I basically developed a program of work, which was a consulting-led sales engagement to go into VMware's top 150 companies in the region, or customers in the region, and consult with an intent to sell enterprise licenses. And what that gave me was amazing insight into how these incredibly large organizations have to architect, deploy, and run their platforms. And these were banks and telcos, and the number of core banking solutions that I was part of.
What year was this roughly? What sort of time frame we're talking about?
Started 2010, and ended up finishing there about 2014 when I moved across. So yeah, obviously we exited that Singaporean endeavor, and then I jumped across to Indonesia. Reason being was, of all my time in Asia, that was the coolest market to sell into. It was the most challenging,
Yep.
and had the most opportunity for greatness. And so I really wanted to get into that market and sell. It was a toss-up between Indonesia or Vietnam, to be honest.
Okay. And that's where you and I
first
kind of crossed paths around that time as well, just through mutual acquaintances and the industry as well. So that was our first sort of time that we struck conversation about the industry and where it was going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed. And I was over in Indonesia running a public cloud provider. It was in fact one of the first public cloud providers in Indonesia, and grew that from nothing but an idea to a pretty successful public cloud provider. And it was actually through that endeavor that I got exposed initially to this Docker technology, and which was in my mind the actual light bulb moment, the game changing moment.
Yeah, because you in doing this, and we'll touch on this a little bit later, sort of in terms of the narrative, but you kind of, to use a vernacular, you rode a wave that really wasn't a wave yet with regards to Docker, right? You saw something in it that at the time people were thinking it was pretty cool. From my exposure back then, if we're talking about sort of 2013, 2014 timeframe, we knew that something was happening with this containerization. A lot of us in the industry were tinkering with it, installing Docker on our MacBook Pros and running WordPress VMs and trying to run Doom on Docker in a container and saying, look how cool it is. You can literally do a command line, you're running everything, right? But you saw something more. And just explain the theory about what you saw back then and the potential, because I think it was pretty industry leading when you think about, the time frame.
Yeah, I mean, it was really interesting because you're looking at this technology and you're thinking, okay, so we are used to virtual machines. My career has been in virtual machines, and virtual machines are great. They let you package your entire system and move it around, but it doesn't really help you with the fact that you've got applications within a virtual machine that conflict, and you end up just getting a whole bunch of virtual machine sprawl. You can't have two applications in the same VM that conflict. You can't have different versions within the same VM. The VMs were great about giving you a degree of efficiency from hardware, but they didn't really help you with application conflicts or anything like that. And then when I saw containers and thought, oh my goodness, this is a way to actually do what virtual machines did for servers for applications. So it's a way of virtualizing an application is a way of thinking about it. And back then, I was already using a product called ThinApp, from VMware for application packaging on the desktop. And I thought,
do they still have that? Is that still a product?
And I thought I have no clue.
Yeah.
But at the time, I was thinking that this whole Docker thing, it's very similar to what ThinApp does in applications, but for server side apps. And it's like, hey, this is quite cool. This really is a nice way of giving you the ability to get yet even more efficiency out of your server estate. And this is a way for IT to really remove complexity, remove risk of upgrades, remove the risk of application conflicts, give better security. It was like this thing is going to be amazing.
To that end, did you ever think about, obviously reducing complexity on one side from an application point of view, but did you ever sort of sit to think, and this is actually to me to the point, this is where Portainer probably comes into play, but did you ever think, well, there's complexity in understanding this new platform, there's a relative unknown on it, there's open source components to it. In terms of what IT pros know about how to actually architect it, there's an issue because it is so different in terms of the fundamental architecture compared to virtualization. That obviously came into play with you at some point where you went, I've got to make this easier.
Yeah, well, so when I decided in my mind, okay, I want to understand how this technology works. Honestly, there were 6 months of migraines, and I thought, why the heck is this thing so complicated?
Yeah.
And half of that was because my endeavor into containers was so early. Docker hadn't really created any documentation or best practices. The website was part complete, and so there wasn't really any detailed guides about how to use it and how to secure it or best practices. There was no, at the time, there wasn't even any clustering. There was no swarm.
Yeah, right.
This was pre-swarm when I was involved with it. And I thought, man, this thing is really, really hard, like properly hard. Why does it have to be this hard? You know, I've come from a world that VMware has enriched for us with a vast array of management tool sets.
Yeah.
This Docker thing, where are all of the tool sets to manage this thing? How can I put this thing in production if I can't securely configure it, if I can't monitor what's going on, if I can't see what's going on and be sure this thing is compliant to best practice, if there even are any, how can I possibly put it into production?
Yeah, and then to that end as well, how do you then offer it to someone who, you know, obviously they're going to leverage it, potentially enterprise will leverage it internally, how can you manage it internally? But in our world and the service provider world, which you're so ingrained in as well, how do service providers productize that if they can't control or manage it, right? And I think from memory, VMware had about that time, they had the integrated containers, the VIC, you know, that was out in alpha and beta, and, you know, a few of us were testing it out. But did that kind of help you decide on what you were going to do with Portainer, or was that sort of a separate situation as well?
So that didn't have any input into what I was going to do with Portainer, but my exposure to Docker was initially through VIC. So it was the VIC product that gave me that light bulb moment, that aha moment, and I was like, okay, well that's how VIC do it. How do you do it with Docker? And so and then I was comparing and contrasting container as a VM or container as a container and looking at the difference and coming down to, well, it's still so early, it doesn't actually matter at this point in time.
You know, and that was kind of
got a long time.
We're going to touch on religious wars a little bit later on, because that's always, you know, in this sort of IT landscape, the religious sort of theory, you know, and the war comes to play. But yeah, do you have a container in, you know, natively on bare metal, or do you have it in a VM? That was kind of the big sort of thinking back then. I mean, do you have a VM? It's a container, or is it a VM? And I think the world's kind of, you know, shifted a little bit now, you know, 6 or 7 years later, where I don't think it really matters too much. The efficiencies have been built.
It doesn't matter.
Platform, yeah, it doesn't matter, right? It never did matter, really. It is what it is, right? And again, it was just one of those religious wars that pop up every now and again. So just quickly, so moving on then. So in 2015, then you co-founded Portainer with Anthony LaPena. So what was the sort of go from that theory, that idea, that light bulb moment, to founding a new open source company called Portainer?
Well, so I was sitting there saying, surely for this technology to go mainstream, and back then I was confident it was going to go mainstream. For it to go mainstream, it has to have the tool sets around it to allow a CIO and CTO to confidently tick a tick box to say this thing is safe and secure. We can manage it. We can observe what's going on inside it. And at the time, I looked around and there were no tools anywhere in the market that did that for containers. And I thought, that is just ridiculous. How can that be the case? And so I met Anthony at an event and explained to him what I was thinking and how and why I thought this technology was amazing. He also thought that too, and together we thought, well, actually let's do something about it. You know, thankfully Anthony is an amazing coder. You know, his job is to make me look awesome by simply writing an amazing product.
So at that point, it was only
that's what's happened.
At that point, it was only
it was the two of us.
Okay, two of you, and so Anthony's a coder. You're the brains, and basically you've got something now in 2015. And then, but just before that, because I still think it's important for the listeners out there and the viewers to just explain what Portainer actually is, because we haven't level set that. So you just explain what it actually is.
Okay, so it is a management control plane for container infrastructure. So what that's meant before last week was it was a container management platform for Docker and Docker Swarm environments. So it is a tool that lets you deploy and manage your applications in those environments, troubleshoot, triage, performance monitor in those environments without you having to have a deep technical understanding of those environments.
Which is
I
crucial.
can drive a car, but I don't know how to fix an engine. It's the same kind of thing, right? It was like we really need to be able to let you deploy applications with ease without having to really have that much of a deep understanding of how it works. And it's the same thing with the whole virtualization concept. Many people know how to create virtual machines. Very few people know how to troubleshoot the hypervisor, and it's the exact same thing.
Yeah, and I think justified completely when you look at the landscape today, with regards to, the amount of cloud management platforms or management platforms there are for containers now, trying to get on the wave. And I talked about this, this was a wave before it was a wave for you. So, I think simplifying this complex world that you saw had potential, and then offering people the ability to manage it with ease. And because let's be honest, if you don't have that sort of management plane, even now, really, from a containerization point of view, it can be a bit of a challenge to deploy applications, manage, monitor. So you do need it. So if you developed it, I guess, for a couple of years, and then the first version of Portainer was released in October of 2017. Is that correct?
Yeah, we kind of left it just for our own internal use, because back then I still had a company up in Indonesia that was doing public cloud, and so we wrote it initially just for that service provider, my own company to use, and we got quite a bit of strong uptake and very positive feedback on what we had built, and we were getting asked, hey, can we use this in our data center? We're using it in your cloud. Can we use it in our data center too? And I'm like, yeah, sure, why not? And it started getting some very positive confirmations that what we'd done was the right thing. And we thought, well, actually, let's just open source this thing.
Okay.
Yeah, to me, I didn't really know what that meant at that time.
Okay.
But still, let's just open source it and see what happens. Yeah. And then
did you not want to make money at the time?
Then I got schooled by open source.
Was that it? You didn't want to make any money?
No, it wasn't. No, at the time, it was a tool for the public cloud platform I was running.
Yeah.
I did not want to try and make money out of the tool. It was irrelevant. But then once we open sourced it and it went ballistic, it was like, oh, hang on a second, this thing has got legs.
Yeah. So let's talk about that ballistic situation, because some of the numbers are crazy in terms of this thing. And I remember seeing it across the last couple of years, you on LinkedIn posting these like tremendously huge, almost outrageous numbers through the downloads on GitHub and whatnot. So let's go through some of the numbers from that initial 2017 launch. So what have you done in terms of downloads and pulls and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so it's important to get the right terminology. So it's pulls, not downloads. To use Docker terminology. So pulls is basically either a download of the product from Docker Hub or a check-in. Is this
check-in?
The latest version? It's just a check-in. Yep. So you can't directly correlate pulls to downloads. But anyway, so when we launched it, obviously we launched, and then there was a single download, which was mine. It then went from 1 and then up to 10, up to 100. And then through some act of magic, which I'm yet to try and replicate, we got onto front page of Hacker News. I'm assuming someone of influence mentioned it somewhere, and then front page of Hacker News, and then boom, we went from nothing to 1 million downloads, a million pulls in the space of a month. Whoa. Yeah, I remember waking up. It was Christmas morning. I woke up and we just clicked over 1 million pulls. I'm like, what an awesome Christmas present.
So a month before you had a couple of hundred. A month before.
A couple of hundred. Yeah, and this is madness. And then so Christmas Day 1 million. By New Year's Day it was 10 million, and it was just this whole snowball effect.
Whoa, that's natural. That's like literally
open
crazy.
Source.
It's what you hear, right? Like open source, but it's like that was initially, you didn't do any growth hacking, nothing like that. It seemed to be organic growth, and all of a sudden it went from just steady to exponential to beyond exponential, really.
All I can think was that it was right place, right time. Yeah, it was right place, right time. There were a lot of people like me who were just getting exposed to this technology and thought, this is amazing. Why is it so hard? Surely there's a tool. And whereas when I searched, there wasn't a tool. When other people searched, there was a tool, and it was Portainer. And so they deployed it. People started talking about it. The more people talk about it, the more you hear it, and it just self-propagates. And to be fair, the actual uptake hasn't slowed since then. We clocked 2 billion downloads mid last year, or 2 billion pulls, I should say.
Yeah,
mid
those
last
numbers
year.
are hard. Those numbers are hard for me to comprehend. I just because the way that I look at it is there 2 billion people out there, pulling, or is it again just people pulling at multiple times? How do you get to those growth numbers with this sort of access to a product? Because am I right in saying there's not literally 2 billion people accessing
No,
it? How do
no,
you
far
get to
from
those
it.
numbers? Just so we can explain that in level set.
So interesting enough, it's been adopted in a large number of schools and universities. And so they will spin up a copy for a class and then destroy it, spin up a copy for another class,
Right,
destroy it.
okay,
So
yeah,
there's
okay.
obviously there's obviously a lot of instances that get deployed, used for a moment and then killed. It was also used in a lot of technical training material by other people.
Yep.
You've got it's there in Play with Docker, so people can spin up Play with Docker playgrounds with Portainer, use it, and then it'll destroy itself. So there was a bunch of stuff that was not artificially inflating numbers, but definitely pulling numbers up.
Yeah,
But we
and
know
that's
from
like
our
that's
analytics, so
tinkering, isn't it? That's a tinkering situation. People looking to test the
it is.
technology, they need to be able to test it, and then this is a layer on top of the actual underlying containerization technology, which people obviously saw a great need for. And yeah, you're right. So yeah, that makes sense now in terms of how that growth. It's still, to me, it's crazy. And I think of Silicon Valley episodes where I always like to reference Silicon Valley, the TV show, but where they've got their technology, they've launched their new platform, and they're seeing the amount of downloads as such grow and on the graph, and yours just kind of went like that, pretty much straight up. Yeah. So that was that still into 20? Was that 2018 that was kind of happening?
It was 2018.
All right.
Yeah.
So
and that and it was that point when we said, okay, this thing is obviously appreciated. How do we make it better? How do we now start to formalize what was basically a side hustle, or a project? How do we take that and turn it from a project into a product, and then from a product to a company? Because you can't keep throwing money at a project. So all of the costs to develop the project have to be paid somehow.
I was going to ask,
it isn't free.
Was it still you and Anthony basically at this time as well? Still two people?
Yep, it was all self-funded. A lot of money to develop it, with no money coming in. So yep, it was costing a decent bit of cash. We actually had one more developer working for us on a contract basis. So it was me, Anthony, and another developer.
Yeah.
Contracting, but it was obviously expensive.
Yeah. So let's step back and let's talk about more of this religious war, because obviously you mentioned Docker Swarm, and you haven't mentioned the K word yet, Kubernetes. So we'll get to that because it's obviously a big part of what you guys are doing moving forward. But I mean, Kubernetes. When did Kubernetes? It's only been around for what, 4 or 5 years itself. I'm just trying to think of the time frame of Kubernetes as a management platform for containerization. Did you ever think at the time that we needed to look at supporting Kubernetes versus Docker Swarm? Because I know when you if you just type that up on Google, you'll find all sorts of crazy articles about one versus the other. So what was the thinking, at least initially, with sticking with Docker and Docker Swarm and not looking to support Kubernetes?
So I have never been a fan of complexity. For anyone who has run mission critical IT environments, complexity is the mother of all nightmares.
Would agree. Yeah.
When something goes wrong, when something goes wrong at 4 a.m, the last thing you want is a complex system that only 1 or 2 people know how to fix. You don't want that. You've got SLAs, you've got people relying upon you. You don't want complexity. Back then, Swarm was all about batteries included, simplistic, very easy to use. Kubernetes at the time, and still to this day was all about giving you every single lever that you can pull, every dial you can adjust. If you don't like the actual networking driver that comes with it, you can change it. You don't want the storage, you can change it. Yeah. Infinitely flexible, but also infinitely more complicated. Yes. And I thought, okay, cool. So at 4 a.m, when this thing implodes, and it's not if, it's when, who is going to genuinely have the skills and competence to be able to triage and troubleshoot this thing? I can't have Portainer help propagate this thing until it is more stable, more widely accepted. And that's why we held off for so long, because we could not find a way to bring its capabilities into Portainer that would not expose our users to undue risk.
Yeah, and that lends itself as well to this conversation. I'm sure people out there listening to this that understand the cloud native landscape, if they've ever seen the cloud native foundation, that PDF they've got, which is like, I think it's like 150 meg PDF you can download with just the landscape of the cloud native landscape. It's huge. Like there's so much, and this is that complexity that I think you were talking about, to a certain extent, not just with Kubernetes, but with the whole cloud native landscape at the minute. There is so much different platforms, different applications, doing a whole bunch of different things: networking, containerization, security, backup. It's a complex world, and I think the theme that you've kind of gone through with Portainer is about simplifying that and making it as easy and accessible as possible to run applications on containers. That's kind of the be all and end all, I think, as to why Portainer kind of exists. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, but it's actually really important to note that it's actually quite easy to make something simple, right? You just simply take away features. It's actually very, very, very hard to make something simple without compromise.
Yeah.
And that's what we have done with Portainer, is said how can we abstract away the complexity so the user has a very easy to use control plane without having to make them give up on capabilities of the platform. There's no point us saying, here is Portainer supporting Kubernetes, but you can only do 4 things. People were like, well, why would we do that? We'll just stay native. So and that has been our big draw card, is that we found out how to make this thing simple to use without people having to give up capabilities of the underlying platform.
Excellent. All right, so let's move forward to more recent times, because you've had a bit of a shift in terms of thinking, in terms of open source and where you're going to go from an enterprise perspective. But just maybe go through the last sort of 12 months as to your thinking as to where Portainer was and how you've got it into maybe the August announcement where you announced the $1.2 million US seed funding. Because I'm really interested in how that came to be and what that's going to allow you to do moving forward with regards to the platform.
Yeah, and it's interesting because open source projects often struggle to remain viable. Most people out there in the world think open source equals free.
Yes.
Well, someone sometime has to pay to create this stuff. Code doesn't just magically appear.
Not always
People
for the love.
to either give their personal time. No, they're giving their time at night times, on weekends, or it's companies who are writing the code with a secondary motive, either to get them to pay for support, the Red Hat model or Rancher model. There are ways and means to monetize. Open source projects that don't have a strategy to monetize in any way often start up amazingly and then they run out of cash and die. And I did not want that to be Portainer. I can see what we're doing for the world. We're making this technology easier. It would have been a shame to have simply run out of cash and stopped when we had so much potential.
Yeah.
And so it was like, okay, well, what are we going to do? How are we going to get this thing self-funding so that we can continue to invest in the open source product, keep growing the open source product, not a people paying for the open source product by having a enterprise version or something over here that people can pay for to fund the whole thing. Yeah. And that was the kind of inflection point. It's like, well, okay, so to do that, we're going to have to get money to go and create this separate product, the separate thing that we want to charge for. Where can we get this money from? And that was the whole VC, endeavor, was let's go and find someone who believes in our journey, believes in the potential of what we have. Will give us the money to go and build this product, this enterprise product, to go and sell, to then support the open source community.
Yeah, so, and I guess that led to what happened the last week or so with the release of CE 2.0. So from looking in the research, you spent nearly 5,000 hours developing it, which is a crazy amount of hours. 150 hours worth of testing, and you've added support. The time must have been right for Kubernetes, because you've added Kubernetes support, which I think not only obviously gives you access, or Portainer access, to that as a control plane, but I think from just a general awareness situation, I mean, Kubernetes is such a searched word on the internet. People have got it on their tongue. I think it's obviously from a growth perspective, it's great from that point of view to say, hey, Portainer now supports Kubernetes. But you've remained true to the vision of simplicity without compromise, which you've mentioned before. But let's talk a little bit about that CE release and where it's going to go and how that then leads and what the differences are in that enterprise version that you're going to come out with shortly.
Yeah, so the CE vision was all about laying the foundations for the product moving forward. So the main thing there was adding support for Kubernetes, and you're right, Kubernetes has stabilized a bit now. The earlier versions, every single release, that they were basically breaking something monumentally with the API. So anyone who had written an application that talked to the API had to be rewritten. That's kind of, yeah, it's frustrating. It's kind of normalized now, and it's becoming far more stable. And we figured now was the right time to start embracing it, because it has normalized. We don't have to go through and rebuild our product every time that they release a new API. Also, we felt that we were being unfair to the Kubernetes community by not bringing our simplicity to that market. Obviously, people using Swarm were benefiting greatly from our simplicity, but people over here in Kubernetes, which is arguably 100 times more complicated than Swarm, could not benefit from our simplicity. And so we thought, well, actually, let's do it. Let's bring Portainer simplicity to those people. Those that want to use a simplified version can use it. Those that don't can still use CI/CD tools or API or whatever else. We won't force them to compromise or force them to just choose Portainer or native.
Okay.
Moving forward,
moving into the enterprise.
Moving forward, there's actually there's a clean line between the CE and the enterprise version. If there are features in the product that targets a developer or an engineer, they will go in the open source version. Okay. If there are features in a product that are primarily targeting a manager or executive, they will go in the commercial product.
Okay. That's a pretty clear demarcation.
Okay, so
simple.
like as a line, audit logs. So people can log into Portainer and do activities for which they are entitled. In the CE version, those are not logged. I can log in and do anything I like within what I'm authorized to do. In the commercial version, we're going to log X person did X task on X container at this date and this time, and we're going to audit log that, and then allow them to send that to an upstream SIEM or some kind of event monitoring tool.
Yeah.
It just changes the dynamic. It makes it far more enterprisey.
Yeah. And what about supportability? I mean, do you support? I mean, that because a lot of companies, when they release an enterprise version, support is really the biggest differentiator at the back end. Is that something that is part of this theory as well?
Yeah, we're going one step further. We're actually having a success program, not support program. So the success program for the business edition also includes onboarding. What we found was that a lot of issues that were being raised with us around Portainer were because people did not know how to deploy and configure it properly.
Okay.
And so with the business edition, we're going to do a virtual consult where we'll come into your environment remotely and help you get it running for the first time correctly.
Yeah.
As well as then having regular monthly check-ins with you. Is everything going okay? Do you have any questions? Just a check-in process.
That's awesome.
As well as being there to help you if something breaks, if there's a bug or something isn't doing what you want it to do, we'll be there to help you. Normal support, but success and support here married together, as well as obviously the product features.
Yeah, right. So okay, so that's great. So I guess you're not 3 people anymore then, because I've seen you adding people left, right, and center. So what's the size of the company now?
It's still small. It's still only 15, but we've got 5 open positions.
Okay.
And we actually currently cover 5 different time zones, believe it or not.
Wow.
Which makes all of company meetings interesting.
Yeah.
So we are hiring the right talent, and because of the nature of the technology, we need the right talent. So we're hiring them no matter where they are. So if we can find someone who knows AngularJS and they're very good, we'll hire them. We don't care where they are. Yeah. If we can get someone who's very good technical marketer, we'll hire them, but it doesn't matter where they are. And so we're just going through and getting the right people to help us grow the business. Yeah,
and in this modern age, regardless of what's happening as well with regards to situation, I think that's a good way to build a business. It's to find the right people in the right space, in the right place. So yeah, you're definitely doing the right thing. All right, so let's start to wrap up a little bit. Time flies when we're having fun and talking about all things containerization. So just the questions I like to ask everyone, on the show is, and I think you've answered to a certain extent, but how do you feel like you disrupted the market initially? What was your disruption feature initially with Portainer?
Definitely the simplicity. Everyone else out there, and still now, 99.9% of our competitors are focused on bringing more and more and more capability to market. They're wanting to expose more and more and more of Kubernetes functionality, raw functionality, and I'm saying that's crazy talk. You know, not everyone wants to be able to see every infinite detail of Kubernetes. There are some that do, and you know, for those guys, you know, have fun. For everybody else, they want this really easy to use, you know, way to manage Kubernetes. And that, you know, I don't know anyone else in there in the market still today that is saying, you know, basically turning up their nose to all of this complexity and saying, no, people don't necessarily want that.
Yeah. And on that note, how do you continue to internally disrupt yourself moving forward? What's your plan for internal disruption?
We have a very extensive list of features planned. You know, we want to be this manager of managers, so that you log into Portainer at 8 in the morning and you log off at 5 at night, and everything you do to manage the platform through the day, you do in Portainer.
Yeah.
And so that means not just writing code, but integrating with other people's code as well. So we're now saying, well, can we do a better job at log analytics than Splunk or somebody else? No. Well, then let's integrate with them. So we're looking at ways to integrate versus code. So you know, challenge ourselves.
Which really leads into the next question. And in the open source world, this is a little bit different, I suppose. But you know, what makes a great technology partner for you? Do you have technology partners in this sort of world?
We do, and we want more of them. Again, we are an overlay, so we run on top of anybody's Kubernetes platform, anyone. So it doesn't matter whether you're running Rancher or OpenShift or DigitalOcean or Amazon or Azure or anybody. As long as it's Kubernetes or Docker, we'll run, because we talk those APIs. So all of those companies are, in theory, our partners. I would love for them to reach out and formalize some of those relations. But yeah, moving forward, you know, we definitely want to build tighter relations with other technology providers in the same space to say, let us integrate together.
That's awesome. All right, so that's been a great conversation. I think, you know, you've really articulated, you know, what Portainer is. It's got an amazing history. Again, I'm just like blown away by those pools and how that grew so quickly. It's a great story. Did you want to just give out some notes on, you know, where people can find it? Because I believe there's an online demo site where people can actually test the platform and get a bit of a feel for it. But yeah, just give a bit of a wrap in terms of, you know, where they can find more information on Portainer.
Yeah, so just like the brand name, it is portainer.io. Pretty easy website to remember. Everything is on there. There are links on there to our online demo. The demo resets every half an hour, so you've got a short window of time to play, and then it resets. But yeah, go on there, have a play. We've got very detailed installation instructions. Because Portainer runs as a container, it's very simple to get running. It's also available on Play with Docker if you want to see it. Runs on your Windows PC through to an IBM System 390, so you can play anywhere you like. Raspberry Pis are great at running Portainer.
There you go. Yeah, there's a use for it. I've got one in my cupboard here. Maybe I'll pull it out and have a play myself a bit later on. Well, no, thanks, Neil. I think you know, to be fair, this is like for me the epitome of, you know, someone doing great things with great technology, and you know, and great potential technology with containerization. And like I said before, you were well ahead of the game in the curve when it came to seeing an opportunity, and it looks like you've taken it. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what Portainer will do over the next few years.
Cool. I appreciate the confidence in us.
There you go. Good stuff. So with that, the show notes will be up on the site. They'll be up on all the platforms, YouTube and the podcast. You can find me at anthonyspiteri.net. GTWGT podcast, we've got that on Twitter as well, and gtwgt.com. I've been promising the revamp of the website that is coming. Just got to work on that. And if you're not subscribed, or if you're new to the show and would like to hear more, you can subscribe to, again, any podcast, any client, catch up during the web. And with that, I'd like to thank Niels and Portainer, and we will see you next time.